A follower sent me this story after visiting St. Augustine, Florida, and she swears that she may have spent an evening walking around with something that wasn't entirely human. Now, St. Augustine is the oldest city in our nation's history, right? It is the oldest continuously occupied European established city in the United States. Founded in 1565 by the Spanish, it's older than Jamestown and older than Plymouth, and some of its streets have been walked on for nearly 500 years. And according to this viewer, someone there seemed to remember all of it. Now, side note, if you haven't been to St. Augustine, absolutely beautiful. I've been there like 100 times. Recommend that you go. Anyway, she said she was visiting St. Augustine with a group of friends, and she signed up for one of the city's famous history tours, right? They have them all the time. And before the tour started, they stopped at a small martini bar, and it was near the historic district. And while waiting for drinks, she noticed a woman sitting alone. And she said she looked absolutely beautiful, not in like an unusual or like a glamorous way. She just looked timeless, right? She had dark red hair, pale skin, elegant clothes that seemed to look modern but old-fashioned all at the same time. Now, the woman wasn't drinking. She was simply just watching people. Just people watching, whatever. And at one point, the hostess walked over and she made casual conversation with her. And that's when this follower overheard something a little strange. The hostess asked if she was visiting from out of town, and the woman just smiled and she's like, yeah, you could say that. I mean, I haven't been here in a very, very long time. Not uncommon, but the comment seemed normal, of course, at first, but something about the way that she said it really stuck with her. Not like someone who hadn't visited in a few years, more like someone returning after generations. It just had that feel to it. And a little bit later on, she noticed the woman was leaving. And oddly enough, she ended up on the exact same walking tour as this viewer who sent me this story. And the woman, she joined the group by herself, and she stayed near the back, didn't really talk to anybody. And at first, nobody paid much attention to her, right? Until the guide started to talk about the city. And every time that he mentioned, like a historical event or something, the woman quietly would add details that nobody could really know. Not correcting him or being like arrogant in any way, but just adding more validity to what he's saying, right? Little small things that sounded incredibly specific. And when the guide mentioned, a fire that actually destroyed part of the city centuries ago, the woman softly said in the back, yeah, the smoke lingered for days and you can smell it all the way near the bay. And the guy just laughed it off, and, he had asked if she'd, read about that somewhere, and she simply just smiled and, was like, brush it off. Later, he actually mentioned an old building that no longer exists. And before he could even continue, she just casually added in again. She's like, oh yeah, the balconies were painted blue and the owner hated the color and complained about it constantly. And several people in the group just laughed and they were like, oh, okay. But the guide, he started to look a little confused, like, who's giving the tour guide here? Because apparently that detail wasn't on any plaque or any of the touring information at all. And as the night went on, it got stranger. The woman seemed to know things before the guide would even say them. Names, dates, descriptions, not facts that you'd memorize from a book or, but I'm talking about facts from memories. Like, you could just tell when someone's recounting something from their own memory. Like, she had actually been there before. And eventually they reached an area near some of the oldest streets in the city, and the guide pointed toward a stone structure, and he began to explain its history, of course. And before he could finish, the woman again, she just quietly whispered, it used to look a little different and whatever. But anyway, my follower happened to be standing beside her at this point, and she asked her, what do you mean? And the woman just stared at the building for a few seconds and said something like, the windows were smaller and there used to be roses growing along the wall here, and oh my God, it gave it such color. And my follower just laughed, and she's like, oh, how could you possibly know that? And the woman just turned to her, toward her, and for the first time, her smile kind of just disappeared. And she just said, well, because I remember them, not Not like, oh, I read about them, or oh, I've seen it, I've studied them, oh, I went to, Flagler College, or I know. No, she said, I remember them. And the way that she said it sent chills down her spine. And the tour ended sometime around midnight, like they normally do, and everyone began heading their separate ways. My follower turned to say goodbye to the woman, but she was already walking away alone through one of the narrow historic side streets. And something made her look back one final time, and the woman had stopped beneath a street lamp and standing completely still under it, just watching the old city go by, like someone returning home after centuries of being away. And then she stepped into the darkness between two of the buildings and vanished from sight. The creepy part? Maybe, but the next morning my follower couldn't stop thinking about this woman. Like, she was just so like, not like, she just couldn't explain it. She just was like, oh my God, like, who is she? So she went online trying to identify some of the details that the woman had mentioned. And according to historical records, the blue balconies, the roses, several of the oddly specific details that she had mentioned were actually very accurate, and details that weren't included on the tour, details that were kind of buried in like deep old historical archives. Like, you really would have had to look. So maybe she was a historian, maybe she had spent years studying St. Augustine, maybe she went to Flagler College right there. Or maybe some people never really leave the oldest city in America, and every once in a while, they do come back to see how much has really changed. So tell me what you think. Historian, or do we have something like the Michelsons arriving back in New Orleans after a couple of hundred years? Let me know what you think.